Welcome into the Warchant.com report. I'm Jeff Cameron alongside Ira Schoffel and Gene Williams, and we're looking at that top 40 countdown. We reached the top 5, and we'll do that in just a moment. But another reminder of the criteria for the original top 40 countdown that we provide here at Warchant. It's a balance. It's trying to figure out talent, need, opportunity, potential, all of those things. It's not just about the skill or the recruiting ranking or any of those things. It's kind of an amalgamation of all of those things. So we look now at this group, and I think it's interesting, the top 40 in review, Gene. A lot of variation from the panel this year, more than usual. And I guess we could ask the question. I'll ask both of you, weigh in here, Gene. Why do you think that was? I have a theory, but why do you think that was?
Well, last season sucked. I think that has something to do with it.
That's a good one. That's you kind of went straight to where I was
So
going.
nobody excelled last season. I mean, really, outside of Terry, we talked about this earlier, outside of Terry and Marvin Wilson, who's really established, we know is going to be a really good player this season. And I'm guessing they might be in the top 5, not to give it away. So, I mean, I think that's a big part of it, too. And a lot of we're just kind of guessing, well, we think this guy, we talked about in the last segment, we think this guy's in a better position. We think he'll be better this year. It's 2 years in the system. He should make that jump and be a good player. But a lot of that we're just projecting. I think there's a lot more projecting and guesswork this year than there has been in previous years.
That kind of summarizes where I was going to go, which is that the season was awful, and a lot of this is based on hope. And so we're all going to have varying degrees of hope, for starters. Secondly, we're going to kind of look at projecting an offense that, while we've seen elsewhere, we haven't seen applicable here. You've got new coaches coming in, so then trying to figure out how a player fits in that system is a bit of guesswork as well.
Yeah, I think that's as big a reason as anything also, because you don't know how exactly Kendall Briles is going to call this offense. You don't know whether or not the slot receivers or running backs, how they're going to be used, all the different ways. We saw some things in the spring, but we don't think we saw all of it. And then on defense, you do have some guys switching positions. I mean, a guy like Leonard Warner last year, we saw coming on at linebacker. Well, they moved him to defensive end. We got the moves with Levante Taylor going to more like a nickel back and safety, and Stanford Samuel's moving back to corner, which he did late last season. So I just think there's a lot of movement, which happens with football teams that are trying to find themselves.
Yeah, and transition with new coaches and new players. I think it's interesting when you look in the middle of this list, and if you think about a guy like Keyshawn Helton, or you look at Trayshawn Harrison or somebody else, these are guys that could have great seasons. In this offense, they could end up being stars, but we just don't know how they'll be used and how frequently they'll be used. Let's get into this group and start with number 5. Stanford Samuel is a player that everybody has high hopes for coming into the season. Everyone but Corey had him outside the top 5. But everybody did have him in the top 10. Will he be the best DB this team has this year?
I think there's a decent chance of that. Again, Ira mentioned it, but here's a guy we moved around. He went from corner to safety last year, then back to cornerback. And by the end, it's sort of like, okay, he's back at cornerback. I talk about how Levante should be matched up more with the slot guys. He's your guy who should be going up against the physical guys. He's the guy who's got NFL-type talent for a cornerback. Now that he's in that position his second year, this would be his money year. I mean, he could be a guy who has a good season he could go after this year. So I think he's in a good position to have a really good season. So I like him. I think this is a good spot for him, number 5.
And I would say, in fairness to him, not only did he switch positions, but he was a guy who played hurt early, right from the get-go. Yeah. He was hurt. He was never fully healthy. I think that's true of a lot of that secondary. You had guys that were beat up, trying to play through it. I don't want to excuse away poor technique. I don't want to excuse away poor play. But I think some of that had to do with the fact that they could never really get healthy.
Yeah, and I think with Samuels in particular, he's also a guy that I understand the idea behind the move. They thought he was a playmaker. They thought he could affect more of the field than one side, in more of a safety position. But I think if you look back at his whole life, he's always had the ball in his hands, or he's been guarding that one guy. He's always been the lockdown corner, or he had the ball in his hands at quarterback earlier in his career. So I just think he's a guy that some people are better away from the ball and some people are better at the ball. And I think they were at least admitted it during the season and made the move back. But yeah, as Gene alluded, his size, he's got great size for a corner, and those mismatches you saw so often last year you think would be minimized with a guy like him.
Well, he's got nastiness too. He will hit you. He wants to play. He's a football player, and they need,
like his dad had.
Yeah, well, and they need more of those guys. They need guys that have a little what for to them, and he does. So potentially a big season for Stanford Samuel Jr. We hope so. Cam Akers was number 1 on our list a year ago, and it's no secret that he had a terrible season. But mostly, I think we would all agree here that had to do with the worst offensive line in the Power 5, one of the worst offensive lines in the country. It started from game number 1 against Virginia Tech, where his first carry, he touches the ball, he's hit 5 yards in the backfield, hurts his ankle, is never right the rest of the year. I think he checked out mentally. I think he wasn't right physically, and he was behind an offensive line that was putrid.
I think you pretty much nailed it. I
There
mean,
we
little
go.
nagging
There
injury
we
all
go.
season, horrible offensive line. We know he's got talent. I mean, he rushed for over 1,000 yards his freshman year, so we know he's good. Is he the next Dalvin Cook? Maybe not, but he could still be legitimately a top 10 running back in college football. So I really like just give him a little bit of blocking, and this is going to help the Laybournes there with him because it won't all be him now. I think they can mix those guys in, maybe put them in the backfield together, do some fun things with them.
Well, and they're going to run between the guards in this offense. You know, they're going to try to get those 3 or 4 yards early on. And I think if you're going to look at the areas where you have a shot to run better than you did a year ago, you would say the interior of the offensive line is going to be the strength. Certainly not the tackles.
Yeah.
So, you know, if he's going to try to get in there and get a few yards early on, that opens things up. This offense gets humming a little bit, more opportunity.
And I think the key with this offense is not getting behind the chains. And I think
Like they did all last year.
The mistake, even Cam Akers, one of the mistakes he made was trying to look for big plays.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to get the 2 yards if it's just 2 yards. You've got to get the 1 or 3 yards. You don't have to pop everything, and you can't have second and long or third and long. And that's going to be a key for him. If he can do that, it's going to do wonders for the offense.
Can you imagine, guys, we're watching on Saturdays and it's 2nd and 6? Can you? I mean, picture a day where that happens. It's 3rd and 2,
Sometimes
guys.
you're
This
just
is
begging
manageable.
for 2nd and 9 last season.
Yeah, last season you're like, well, look at that. It's 2nd and 14. 3rd and 9. This is going to be a problem. All right, so James Blackman was number 1 on Gene's list. I love James Blackman for the intangibles. I think he's okay physically, but I love who he is. I love the leadership he'll provide. I love that the players love him. So I understand why you would have him number 1. He also plays the most important position. Why did you have him as the top player, though? We certainly didn't, because I think physically he's limited a little bit.
Well, I think on a scale, so importance 10 out of 10. We know that quarterback most position on the field. And you said some of the intangibles, so that bumped it up a little bit. The leadership.
Yep.
They love this guy, unlike the last guy, which maybe not so much, but this guy, they love to play for this guy. And again, admittedly a very small sample size, but what happened in the one game he played last year?
Well, he lit it up.
Throw out his freshman year, he was not supposed to be in the field that year. Bad recruiting by the former head coach, didn't have a viable backup when there was an injury there, so he got thrown into the mix when he shouldn't have. That one sample size threw for over 400 yards against NC State. I think this is a good fit in this offense with him, and now he's the guy. And I'm not a Hornibrook. I like the kid.
It's a good backup.
But he's a solid backup, but he came from a system that doesn't match up with what Florida State's going to do. I don't see any scenario outside of an injury where he's going to be your starting quarterback. So for all those reasons, and again, you can take Blackman and the next couple of guys we're going to talk about, throw them in a mix. I'm fine with any of them being number 1.
Yeah, we all are fans, I think, of James Blackman. I think that's one thing that would come across here. If you talk to anybody in the panel, you talk to Florida State fans, I think people like this kid, and you're rooting for him to succeed.
Yeah, I had him a little lower mostly because the accuracy issues concern me. But, Gene, you could tell his background as a litigator because he was convincing me as he was talking. I was like, you know what, I probably didn't take into the intangibles enough. So maybe I should have had him up at 2 or 3. But
the whole time he was talking, I was thinking, man, he's sticking it to Ira. Because I knew where you had him.
But no, I just think the accuracy issue is the big thing. Look, everybody I think are so excited about James Blackman because they so did not want to see DeAndre Francois anymore. So I think they're grading him on a little bit of a curve. And yes, he had a really good game last year. But I think there are going to be times this year where you remember why he wasn't necessarily the starter from day 1 last season.
He could struggle with those intermediate range throws, and that's a little frustrating. If he gets that under control, we may see a really good year. Obviously, from a numbers standpoint, in Bryle's offense, quarterbacks have always put up huge numbers. Tamorrion Terry came in at number 2. Obviously, you know who's then going to be number 1, given if you follow the list. But Tamorrion Terry is as electrifying a player as Florida State has, probably the most electrifying player, and a guy that would actually start at Clemson, Alabama, other elite programs that we haven't been as of late. So there is a guy that if they block it up a little bit, we could see unbelievable play from Tamorrion Terry.
Oh, I mean, it's ridiculous. As I said, the only guy on the offense. I mean, imagine what that offense would have been without him. At least there was always those 1 or 2 plays where, for whatever reason, the other team would go, well, we'll just single our 5'10" corner on him and leave out an island. Even more maddening is half the time they didn't throw it when they were in that situation. We really need Corey to answer this because I know he's the advocate for Terry.
He's his agent.
But he's a special player, and if they can get some other players, we mentioned Laybourne, Akers, maybe some of those young receivers, Harrison, some of those, and put some of the pressure on him and spread some things out, I think it'd be a really special season for this guy.
They used to have the Randy Moss rules, right? And in that situation, anytime you got single coverage, and this is true when he was at Marshall, it was true when he was in the NFL. If it was single coverage, whatever you play you called, if it wasn't to him, it is now to him. This is the way it should be with Tamorrion Terry.
Yeah, it just reminded me of those Randy Moss Marshall highlights. Those were unbelievable. But
how about the spring guy? I don't know if you guys were around for him in the spring.
Yeah.
I mean, it was unbelievable spring. I mean, he had long touchdowns, Moss, in every single game. It was just unstoppable.
But
Raised his hand up as soon as he
Still
looked
drives me
across.
nuts thinking what that
Tamorrion
was.
Terry, I mean, I'm not going to say he's Randy Moss. Moss, but he's that kind of athlete in the sense of so long, so athletic, and has good hands for a guy of that size and unbelievable speed. So I just think the sky's the limit. They actually have to, I think Kendall Browse will actually throw the ball to him. They'll target him a lot more. And I also think that, he's going to be a more complete receiver than he was maybe a year ago. But if you think about his career, I think at the end of his career when he leaves Florida State, it's going to be remarkable to look back at the fact that he was basically unrecruited until very late in the process. Florida State got into him late. And then, this redshirted, didn't play as a freshman at Florida State on a team that was not any good offensively, and then has this meteoric rise. I mean, so you don't want to hype him too much, but it's hard not to hype him enough.
Really good player, and I can't wait to see him this year because this is an offense that is going to give opportunities to receivers all day long. Let's look at number 1. It's Marvin Wilson, and Marvin Wilson didn't start last year, inexplicably. But, I guess they wanted to see how the other guys played early in games and not have your best defensive player out there. But Marvin Wilson is number 1, and he will start this year, that is for sure, and is a guy that can dominate at the point of attack, is a physical menace, but also all those intangibles you described for James Blackman, I think, are applicable to Marvin Wilson. He loves Florida State. He loves being a Nole. He loves playing football, and he says to everybody around him, let's go. And this is a guy that you want to follow. To a man, they love him. Marvin Wilson should have a huge year.
Yeah, recruiting rankings don't always get things right. They miss a lot of stuff, but they nailed it with this guy. This was your number 1 defensive tackle a few years ago, and he's been everything as advertised. And like you said, Jeff, you've seen the transformation. The more leadership has come in the last couple of years. You see his workout, his work ethic, everything else. It looks like he's playing to put himself in position to be a first-round draft pick next year, which I think he will be if he has the kind of season. We think he's disruptive, he's physical. I mean, he's got everything you want out of a guy. And going back to any coach you talk to, man, if you can disrupt that middle in the defense, it sets everything else up. And he's a guy, they have to account for him. You can't just leave him one-on-one with a center or guard, or they're in big trouble.
Another one of those players, there aren't that many right now on this team, but another one of those players that you could say would start at Clemson and Alabama and other.
Yeah, and really on many of the great Florida State teams.
Yeah, he's that kind of player.
He is just the total package. And again, not just the strength, but also the quickness to get in the backfield, make plays, collapse the pocket, pressure up the middle, as we've seen when Florida State's been on offense the last few years. Pressure up the middle just kills a passing game. And I think Marvin Wilson gives you that, plus the ability as a run stopper, plus the intangibles, as you guys mentioned. Yeah, he's a total package.
Well, let's take a sneak peek ahead, Gene. Let's go ahead and try to predict now what kind of season Florida State's going to have. And based on that, I guess surmise who might be number 1 on next year's list.
Well, I think first you got to look at who may not be on the team anymore. So we just talked about Marvin Wilson. I think he's gone.
Yep.
Cam Akers could be gone. Terry's probably gone. Taylor's a senior. Samuels could be gone. So you start eliminating a lot of it. I'm going to say it's going to be 1 of 2 players right now.
I like
the
it.
first one, not a surprise. James Blackman could be your number 1 if he returns, which is a good chance of that. But I think the one I'm going to throw out there that you may not suspect right now, Jaden Loras would be.
Love him.
To me, he's your next Derwin James. He's your next that kind of elite defensive back that is just a freak. So watch him jump and become a household name this year.
Well, and he's a guy that when we were naming people that we thought should have been in that top 10, should have been in that top 5, he could have been on the list, as he's a guy that is, and he just missed out.
But another guy switching positions too.
Yeah, another guy switching positions. Card. Yeah, that's a good one. I would say Laybourne. I think he's going to have a huge year if he's healthy in this offense, and I think he could catapult to.
And if Cam leaves, he's the guy.
He'd be the guy.
Yeah, I'm going to go with one that you mentioned, Laybourne, and also an outside of Akeem Dent. I think Akeem Dent's got a chance. Again, at that position, you can make a huge impact right away. And what we saw in the spring, he's one of the best football players on that team. So I look forward to seeing what he's going to be a year from now.
Well, this kick starts it all, folks. This is the beginning of it all. I know summer is sleepy, but I always look at this as a check mark, coming in here to be with you guys, with the Warchant.com crew, and having an opportunity to go through this list. You kind of get the juices flowing, the ACC meetings and everything that awaits us. Soon enough, football will be upon us, and a lot of these questions, burning questions, will be answered. We want to thank you for tuning in to the Warchant.com report and for reading all the articles on Warchant.com. For Ira Schoffel and Gene Williams, good work, Aslan. I'm Jeff Cameron. Thanks for watching, everybody. Be well.